Today I am going to compare the amount of content in Warlords of Draenor to Wrath of the Lich King quick-fire style. I'm choosing Wrath because it's when the game was at its most popular, and it also did a good job of retaining the people who were subscribed. Lots of people have been talking about this recently, so I thought it would be interesting to just look at what the numbers say. Let's start off with dungeons, as they have been a really big topic this time round. Wrath had 16 dungeons, none of which were remakes, and Warlords had 8 dungeons, one of which is a remake. In terms of the number of bosses, that's 57 for Wrath, that's me only counting 3 from Violet Hold, and 33 from Warlords of Draenor. In terms of the unique tile sets involved, Wrath has 10 if you include Gundrak and Drakthron as being different things, or 9 if you consider them as being the same tile set, whereas Warlords of Draenor has 5. In terms of things to consider, Wrath had a badge system and the tabard system which encouraged more dungeon running, and Wrath's heroics were pretty easy, similar to the Warlords ones. Wrath supplied levelers with loads of different dungeons as they progressed, and that's less the case with Warlords, and the ICC dungeons were a level of difficulty above the rest. Plus, Wrath also brought in LFG. Warlords has challenge modes, and it also has Mythic, but they're not really new content as they're just number scaling. Warlords gave us little reason to run the dungeons past the first elements of the legendary quest as well, which is something to consider. In terms of raid content, Wrath had 9 raids in total, and Warlords of Draenor had 3. Though what's maybe a better number is the amount of boss encounters that actually involved. Wrath had 54 raid bosses, and Warlords of Draenor had 30 raid bosses. Now in terms of things to consider, Warlords has 3 difficulty modes, and they're flexible, and then Warlords has LFR as well. Now, due to 10 and 25 being different difficulty levels, Wrath actually catered to the same niches, but just without the flexible system. Wrath also had numerous small, pug-friendly raids, which were quite nice, and also, while Nax was a thing from level 60, I believe it's 0.1% of players that cleared it at level 60, and probably far less of the actual Wrath population. Moving on to PvP, Wrath brought a new PvP zone with Wintergrasp, and it also brought 2 new battlegrounds, Isle of Conquest and Strand of the Ancients. It also has 2 arenas, Orgrimmar and then the Dalaran Sewers. Warlords brought Ashran, and then no battlegrounds or arenas. Moving on to zones, at launch Wrath had 10 zones, and at launch Warlords of Draenor had 6, 7 if you include Ashran. Now that's fine, but what about leveling zones? Well, Warlords has 5 leveling zones due to FFR and SMV being available to one faction only. Wrath of the Lich King had 8 leveling zones that were available to any given character. Now in terms of the post-launch stuff, Wrath still had its 10, but Warlords of Draenor had Snan Jungle, which bumps its number up by 1. In terms of things to consider though, Crystal Song Forest was nearly entirely devoid of content. Unlike Ashran, Wintergrasp did have a large PvE presence and even contained a raid. Now the extra leveling zones in Wrath allowed for quite a bit more choice, which I definitely did like overall. Another interesting number is from an infographic that one of my subscribers, Sar, put together. Now I don't agree at all with his conclusion on flying, but I think the numbers are definitely very interesting. Keep in mind that Warlords does have more multi-stage quests and more bonus objectives within zones, but it also has fewer zones, and if we're honest, the zones that are there are very quick to get through. Also, there are a lot less quests at endgame, so I definitely do see the disparity in those numbers pretty much reflected in my own gameplay experience. Next, let's cover reps. Warlords has 8 and Wrath has 13. Of those reps, only 3 of the Warlords ones have proper daily content, but let's be honest, the Tanan ones are a bit contextless and kind of naff. In Wrath, though, we had 8 of them have daily quests, but they were to varying degrees, and a lot of rep gathering could be done via running dungeons. Next, let's talk about the amount of content that was released within a year in regards to raids and dungeons. So, within the first year, Wrath had 7 raids and Warlords had 3, which equates to Wrath having 44 bosses to Warlords of Draenor's 33. In terms of dungeons, Wrath had 13 dungeons in the first year, and Warlords of Draenor of course had the base 8, so Wrath definitely had more within that first year. In terms of armor models, a Reddit user put together an interesting comparison of weapon models of the dungeons of Wrath and WoD. As you can see, Wrath has significantly more. I've since went through Wowhead and I've pretty much confirmed what he found. Now, there are some other interesting things. I used the Wowhead transmog set tool to look at unique sets. In Dungeons, Warlords has 12 sets, 3 for each armor type, with them all being recolors of each other. Wrath had 17 sets with far fewer recolors. Wrath has 47 different quest sets, whereas Warlords has 24. There are recolors on both sides, but a higher proportion of the Warlords ones are recolors. Looking at raid sets, we have 173 for Wrath and 231 for Warlords. When I filter out the recolors, Warlords has 119 and Wrath has 102. A big reason for this is that Wowhead includes LFR mode as a raid, and of course LFR has got some separate gear currently. Plus we also have an additional class now with the Monk, which will result in a few more sets getting in here and there. Both expansions did add quite a lot of systems to the game. Some make bits of content more or less relevant. For an example, Mythic Dungeons make the pre-existing Warlords dungeons quite a bit more relevant in 6.2. Warlords did bring other things to the game. We have Garrisons, the Garrison campaign, the Garrison invasions, Garrison shipyard, Garrison trader system, Garrison profession system, Garrison follower system, and Garrison mission system. It also had more cinematics and more voice acting in quests as well, so there were some pluses there, I suppose. Wrath also brought a new class and profession. Really, I think what we see here, though, is that the Garrison system resulted in Warlords moving away from the bread and butter content that really makes an MMO an MMO. The world had less zones, it had less choice, it had very, very quick leveling, it had fewer dungeons, and actually, oddly enough, less raid content, and also reputations were gutted. Overall, I'd say that I think myself, and perhaps the majority of players, prefer the traditional MMO affair as at least being a solid base, and perhaps it's unfortunate that the Garrison system and some of the things they did in Warlords seem to definitely be to the detriment of the traditional MMO content that I think over the last 10 years we've all proved that we do actually like, oddly enough. So hopefully that's recognised in the next expansion's direction. Anyway, let me know what you thought about these numbers down in the comments, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.